All right, great. Let's get started. Thank you to everybody who's joining us today. This is TRPA 101 for Realtors and Consultants, and we will be going through a presentation all about development rights, coverage, permitting, Lake Tahoe info, things like that. So thank you for joining us. Wanted to give a shout out to Stacy Collins from First American Title, who actually reached out to us months ago with this idea of giving the presentation and turning it into a webinar. So thank you so much, Stacy. We are going to be covering quite a few things today. As I mentioned, we'll start off with just the webinar guidelines, a little bit of history and where we're going with TRPA, and then we'll jump right into coverage and permitting, development rights, parcel tracker, and follow that up with a Q&A. So a few guidelines. All attendees are muted. We ask that you please use the Q&A box to submit your questions. Those questions may be summarized, so if you don't hear your question being repeated verbatim, please don't be offended. We might just be consolidating similar questions. And we also wanted to let everybody know that the recording and the slides will be sent to all attendees after the presentation. So these are your presenters today. We've got a great lineup, and we will be diving right in. My name is Victoria Ortiz. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. My contact info is there, and before every presenter, you will see their contact information. So we'll dive right in. As many of you know, TRPA was the nation's first bi-state environmental planning agency. We lead our region's efforts to protect our spectacular environment while supporting our communities to prosper economically. This year is our 50th anniversary, so we wanted to give you a little bit of background on how we came to be and where we're going. But first, we wanted to get an idea of how comfortable the audience is with TRPA. So I'm going to start a poll here, and we can test our familiarity with Zoom right away here. So the question is, how familiar are you with TRPA and its programs? And I'm going to launch the polling now. So hopefully all of you can see the poll in progress. Oh, good. It looks like we're getting a bunch of votes here. Thank you so much for voting. We'll give it just another 30 seconds or so. Excellent. Okay. Looks like we've got about 82% have voted. So I'm going to end the poll so that you can see the results. So it looks like about 50% are somewhat familiar. Another 34% are very familiar. We have a few that are not familiar with TRPA at all, and some that are a little. Thank you for filling out that poll for us. So hopefully this is helpful for you. We will be going both in detail and giving a little bit of background, so hopefully we will cover the full breadth for everyone. So we wanted to start with this picture of the Upper Truckee Marsh in the 1940s. At the time, it was the largest wetland in the Sierra Nevada, and much of the Tahoe Basin was actually built out between the 1950s and 70s to support the growing tourism industry. So as many of you know, in the 1960s, the Olympics really put Tahoe on the map as a year-round destination, and rampant development took place. So keep an eye on this image. I'm going to show the later shots. So this is 30 years later. In 1969, you can see the development of the Keys and all sorts of other developments that had taken place. TRPA was actually created at this time in 1969 when the states of California and Nevada came together and approved a bi-state compact to oversee development in Lake Tahoe. Congress ratified this agreement, and TRPA was born. Now, at this time, approximately 75% of marshes and 50% of meadows were developed before the need to protect these areas was well understood. TRPA inherited this, what we call legacy development. And in fact, our regional plan focuses on protecting sensitive lands that are left and moving that legacy development into the urban core. And today, although urban development only makes up about 10% of the land use in the Lake Tahoe Basin, it's a pretty small percentage, but it has huge environmental impacts. So by destroying the sensitive lands that once acted as natural filters for water, pollution could now directly enter Lake Tahoe. And this has led to decreased clarity and large algal blooms. Older development is often a significant source of water pollution as well. 70% of fine sediment that enters the lake is from private properties, roadways, and asphalt parking areas. So this is why BMPs, or best management practices, are so important, and it shows how everybody here in Lake Tahoe has a part to play. The other part of this is that oftentimes these developments were very automobile-centric. This was when a lot of the sprawl took place with little regard for the environment, and a lot of this widely distributed development patterns made transit systems really inefficient and created an overabundance on the automobiles. So that walkable, bikeable community infrastructure wasn't there, and a lot of those areas lacked safe and convenient pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So the land coverage and development rights system was adopted in the 1970s and 80s to ensure that the pace of development aligned with environmental capacity. And to help navigate that balance between environment and development, TRPA has adopted 9 environmental quality standards, which we call thresholds. Now, a lot of these you may be familiar with, but there's some that are especially important for realtors. Things like vegetation. These would be questions like tree removals, or for water quality, we'd be looking at BMPs that I mentioned before. For scenic, questions about signage or painting. And noise, this shows how much noise are you getting around that house. A lot of the noise that we get in our neighborhoods are tires on the road that make up a lot of that. So we are a planning agency, and as such, we adopt plans and regulations for Tahoe, which we achieve and maintain to help achieve and maintain the region's environmental goals, while at the same time providing opportunities for orderly growth and development, which is consistent with these environmental standards. So the goal of the regional plan is to create compact, walkable town centers around the lake while removing that legacy unplanned development from sensitive lands. This type of sustainable redevelopment creates vibrant, economically stable towns while also restoring the environment. And this measured and responsible growth policy has been shown to preserve property values over time. But of course, we can't do it alone. And we bring together the best scientists, environmental groups, businesses, and community partners from Lake Tahoe and around the globe to help solve these problems together. A great example of this is the Environmental Improvement Program. This is a bipartisan collaborative effort to restore Lake Tahoe. It was launched in 1997 and was re-energized by former President Barack Obama in 2016. And over the last 20 years, partners have invested over $2.4 billion with a B on over 400 environmental restoration projects. So this includes everything from private investment from property owners on things like BMPs as well. Without their investment, a lot of the public dollars could not have come through. And the EIP is really making up for legacy development. And TRPA helps to implement this EIP in 3 ways. In one way, it's through permitting. So again, working with private property owners and yourselves on things like BMPs and tree removals. Part of it is these big restoration and recreation projects that you've seen all around the lake, working with our partners. And a lot of this is education and outreach as well. And so we do things like watercraft inspection stations to make sure that no new aquatic invasive species are entered into Lake Tahoe. So some of the projects that you may be familiar with are things like roadway erosion control to address uplands and pollutant loads, forest field management to remove the chance of catastrophic wildfire and property damage, habitat restoration, bike and pedestrian trails, things like that. So you might be wondering, where are we heading? TRPA has an important role as leader for creating and implementing a regional strategy for mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency with our partners. And we incorporate these adaptation principles into everything we do, our code, our land use regulations, and our projects. And a lot of these really go together. So when we're looking at the built environment and climate change, it's hard to distinguish one from the other because there's so much overlap. But for instance, with transportation, we're looking at how can we update the regional transportation plan and the funding strategy. You may have heard a lot about the Highway 89 corridor plan and the Highway 28 corridor plan that's going on. We're also looking at recreation. So how can we better enhance the user experience? This is visitors, this is locals, this includes parking management. We're looking at housing. Things are changing a lot with accessory dwelling units or ADUs, deed-restricted housing for local workers, things like that. And of course, with sustainable communities overall as a goal of creating these walkable, bikeable town centers. And then with climate change, this is putting an extra emphasis on everything we do. So with forest management, things like Lake Tahoe West, which is a landscape scale approach to restoring the West Shore, or looking at aquatic invasive species, those boat inspections or active eradication projects. And of course, water quality remains a priority. So looking at those neighborhood-wide BMPs and where we can focus our efforts for the biggest bang for our buck. We're also always looking at these regional strategies for mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency. So you might be wondering how you can get involved. If you haven't already, I highly recommend that you sign up for our e-news. You can do that on our website at trpa.org. We also have an award-winning publication called Tahoe In Depth that goes into the history and some of the environmental stories, current and past, for Lake Tahoe, and that gets mailed out to every single property owner in the basin. And of course, we recommend that you follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are all areas where we're constantly updating the news cycle with what's going on in our realm. You may have also heard we have this great webinar series that's focused on the Regional Transportation Plan update. We just had one on trails this Monday, and we have 3 more, possibly more coming up. So you can sign up for those at trpa.org/RTP/get involved. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Allie.
All right, thank you, Victoria. I am going to share my screen. All right, so let's see, hold on. There we go. So I'm Allie Borowski. I'm a senior planner and customer service manager at TRPA. There's my email and phone number, and this presentation will be emailed to you, so you will have that information. So I'm going to be talking to you about land use regulations and also land coverage. So one of the major aspects that the regional plan focuses on is environmentally beneficial and sustainable development and redevelopment. Today, the majority of the Lake Tahoe Basin is built out, leaving only 2,500 buildable vacant parcels remaining. So we really need to repurpose and redevelop existing properties. Redevelopment really is a good thing for the basin, not only for the economic, but the community benefits and also environmental benefits, including upgrades to stormwater systems, greener building codes, creating more environmentally friendly and energy efficient buildings. So in order to encourage the redevelopment we want to see, the basin has a number of land use mechanisms. So a lot of places use the first 4 bullet points you can see there on the slide. Place-based plans, zoning and land uses, density, site development standards. It doesn't really matter if you're in the Bay Area, another state, almost all jurisdictions use those first 4. So the last 2 are the ones that are specific to the Tahoe Basin, which are regulating the amount of coverage on a property, which is the footprint of that development. And then the second one there is development rights, which Jen is going to be talking more in depth about. So Generally, when you're doing any modifications to a property, excluding a few exempt activities, which you could read about in Chapter 2 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances, 2 permits are needed. You need a TRPA permit and a building permit from your local jurisdiction. And so we do have a MOU in place. And what an MOU is a memorandum of understanding. And so we have one with Placer County, El Dorado County, and the city of South Lake Tahoe. And what that means is they've gone through our training, they know our rules and regulations, and are able to permit on behalf of TRPA. And this is really a benefit to the public, so they can go to one place and get both permits at once. So now we're going to talk about land coverage. So land coverage is really anything man modified on the ground. It doesn't allow water to flow through it or native vegetation to grow in it. And land coverage, the amount of land coverage is really dependent on the land capability of the land. So how suitable that land is for development. You know, if it's really steep, really rocky, really wet, that's not as suitable for development as, say, a nice flat lot. So the first thing I'm going to talk about for land capability is IPS, which is Individual Parcel Evaluation System. I'm sure you've all heard of that. IPS is only for single family residences. And essentially in 1987, TRPA went around to all the remaining vacant parcels for single family residential properties and determined the IPS score. So any home built in 1987 or afterwards is built under the IPS evaluation. And it's a score that ranges from 0 to 1150. A score of 726 or higher, 726 is that magic number, is considered non-sensitive and eligible for coverage exemptions. So in all jurisdictions, the buildable score is 1 except for Placer County, where the score needs to be 726. The other land capability system we have is the Bailey score. And this applies to homes, single family dwelling homes built prior to 1987, and all other uses. So multifamily, commercial, tourist accommodation, those are all evaluated under Bailey. And the score is determined via land capability verification. If it's a single family dwelling, it would be that site assessment, which includes the coverage and land capability. A score of 1 through 3 is considered low capability. So no new development is allowed in any scores of 1 through 3. There's a few small exceptions there. High capability is class 4 through 7. And in that graph below those bullet points, you can see the percent allowable that comes with each one of those classifications. One other thing I think is really helpful to know is the maximum parcel coverages. So there's base allowable land coverages, which is what the parcel comes with. You know, if it's class 6, it comes with 30% coverage. But then you have this max allowable on the right, which is really helpful for IPS parcels or even some residential parcels. For example, I live on a lot that's 5,000 square feet, which is pretty common in the Tahoe Basin. And my home is class 7. And so 30% of 5,000 is only 1,500. But based on the max allowable, a parcel that's 4,000 to 9,000, it's allowed 1,800 square feet. So that would be an additional 300 square feet I could transfer in. So it's good to use both of these graphs. They're not, the maximum isn't always helpful, but it's good to know. Okay. So one other tool I wanted to share with you all is our website, gis.trpa.org/mapmaker. And I find this a really, really great and helpful tool. it shows you mapped land capability. And just to be clear, this isn't verified land capability. You still have to go, TRPA still has to go on site and verify that it's correct. This is really a high level determination. It's mapped land capability, but it's really neat if you are working with a client and are able to pull it up and can see, oh, this is a blanket class 7 area. It's likely to be class 7. You can see the yellow area, that's a wet meadow area. That would be considered 1B SEZ. So, you know, less development or no development allowed there. Whereas this goes up a little bit and is now class 7 where, you know, more development is allowed. Next, I'm going to talk about how TRPA is going electronic. And I think this is something that's actually really exciting. You know, the times we're in, we have gotten almost all of our applications up online. So, you know, even site assessments, commercial projects, you can go into our Citizens Access database, which you can find on trpa.org, apply for anything that you need via TRPA. And we also have implemented and worked on and created electronic stamps, which is really amazing too. So now not only are you able to submit online, we're able to review your project online and even stamp your plans electronically online. So it's really cool. It's really exciting. And so I hope you guys can all share that with the community. All right, from there, I am going to pass it over to Jen, who's going to talk about development rights.
Hey guys, this is Jeff Cowan. I'm moderating chat and questions. We're just going to jump in with a couple of questions that I think maybe could be answered either directly later or now. One is, will the IPE score and placer ever go below the allocation IPE score and placer go below 726? And I said, I know it will, but I don't know what the criteria is, if someone wants to address that. And then we do have a question from Amy about buying coverage. I think that's going to be covered later. We just wanted to call that out specifically. And I think that's it. Well, and then I answered one question if anybody wants to know about coverage overhangs and second stories. Right.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to attempt to answer those questions. Placer County, the current score, like I said, is 726. They would need to implement a water quality improvement project to lower that score. Like you said, eventually it should happen. It's just, there's nothing in the works right now for that. So at this time, it's unclear when that will happen. And then the second question, Jeff, was about buying coverage. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't know if that was going to be covered later in the LT info.
Okay, so in order to purchase coverage, you have to be eligible to purchase coverage. And let me see if I can get back to, get back to my slide here. So the only way you would be eligible to purchase coverage typically is if you can meet this maximum parcel coverage. So like I said, I have a 5,000 square foot lot that comes with this 30%, which is 1,500 square feet, but I'm eligible based on this maximum allowable to go up to 1,800, and that's where I would be eligible to purchase coverage. I will say most of the time parcels are already overcovered, meaning they were developed in the 70s and they already exceed what TRPA would require or call out as your maximum allowable. And so a lot of the times these parcels have grandfathered in coverage. So it's already exceeding this 1,800, 20%, and all those other numbers. So those properties are not eligible for purchasing coverage, only relocation of coverage typically. So hopefully that answers the question about purchasing coverage.
Yeah, we're getting kind of more questions about the placer IPES issue, and it's getting a little bit complicated because obviously people have been studying this issue for a long time, and Placer's been doing lots of projects, but I think that the parcel inventory in Placer County is made up of a lot of parcels that were mapped out. There were really small parcels that were slivers that are actually never going to be developed, but they're in the parcel database. I don't remember the answer to this, but would anybody on the call or maybe later on in the presentation be able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think this is Jen at TRPA. This is one issue that does have a little bit of a complex history and gets into a lot of nuances. I think a good idea would be to send out some follow-up information to all of the attendees and participants afterwards. We can get into some of those more detailed responses that would help people out.
Okay, we can follow up with that. I have a question from Jim. Do you still have the incentive program to install BMPs? And I will, I just figured that this one would fit in here, but I will hold some questions till the end too.
Okay, and we also have Joan on the call here. Incentive program for BMPs?
So maybe we'll just wait till Joan's presentation and she can handle that one. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, great. So this is Jen. I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll dive into development rights. Okay. Thank you so much for using that Q&A box to type in your questions. Please continue to do so as we move through this. We always love these meetings and trainings with real estate agents and consultants across the basin. You know, oftentimes when folks come to the basin, you all are the first that they interact with to learn about how to develop properties and land use regulations and things like that. So having these meetings is just a great partnership, and we really appreciate you all hanging in there with us. So I'm going to talk about development rights. And as Allie mentioned before, this is part of our land use system and our growth mechanisms up here in the Tahoe Basin. And why these are so important is kind of twofold. One, you need development rights before you can build or remodel a property. And the second is that development rights have monetary value. These are assets that are tied to a property, and they can be bought and sold and transferred to other properties. And we'll go into some of that. So in my portion of the presentation, I'm going to talk about what developments are, how to acquire those for a project if you need them, and go through some frequently asked questions that we get. When we talk about development rights, they typically fall into three buckets. There's tourist accommodation units, there's residential units of use, and then there's commercial floor area. The second one here, residential units of use, is made up of a potential residential unit and an allocation. A potential residential unit of use inherently comes with a vacant buildable lot. You combine this with an allocation, almost like a certificate that you get from the local jurisdiction, and that is your right to build. When the potential residential unit of use and the allocation combine and that construction is underway, that's when you get a residential unit of use. So how to actually acquire development rights for my property or project? The first is the first step is to actually see what's already associated with the property. We talked about much of the Tahoe Basin was built out in the 50s and 70s, so there's a good chance that you have land coverage and you have some development rights that are already there that you can use. To find out what is associated with your property, this is a verification that is done through TRPA as an application. So for example, the photo on the right shows a home. This is in a neighborhood that's zoned single family. But say hypothetically, they built an apartment above the garage sometime in the 60s or 70s. You come into TRPA and we will verify that you have coverage associated with your property. And if we can verify that the second unit is legal, you can have that grandfathered in and have 2 RUUs associated with this project. So let's move on. If you do not have the development rights that you need for a project, here's how you can go about getting them. The first is through a project application with the local jurisdiction. So they do hold small pools of development rights. So commercial rights, tourist accommodation rights, residential rights, that they may able to be awarded at the time of the project. The other option is if you were to retire a sensitive lot. This is going back to an incentive under our regional plan. We want to protect the sensitive areas that are left. And these are typically lots that can't be built anyways. So those can be retired and the potential development can be transferred off those lots onto your site. The last 3 here, I want to go into a little bit more detail in the following slides. And that includes transferring rights, actually deed restricting what can be done on a property, and also converting rights from one land use to another. So as we walk through this, I kind of wanted to use a real world example. So hypothetically, I'm going to use this small business owner in South Shore. This is a stand-up paddle shop on Emerald Bay Road. Say the property owner built this small business a few years back, and he had some space on the second story that he was using as storage. At this point, he's considering turning that second story into residential apartments. But he needs to go about getting the residential units before he can do that. So let's go into the first option. That is transferring development. You can transfer land use units, all types of land use units, commercial, tourist, residential, from properties anywhere in the basin. The general rule of thumb with transfers is it has to go from a property that is more sensitive to a property that is less sensitive. So this is a good option if someone has unused or underutilized development rights that they're not using. Say, for example, and this does apply to coverage as well, say, for example, someone has a large asphalt parking lot that goes unused a lot of the time. They could actually remove that coverage, restore the land, transfer that coverage to somewhere else. And the same goes for land use units, development rights. So in the middle picture, say a property owner remodeled an apartment building, and the result was actually larger units. And he ended up with some residential units, the development rights, that he no longer needed. He could transfer those to another property. A good thing to keep in mind with transfers is TRPA does have an incentive program where we try to award good behavior, or the movement of development rights that we want to see. So if you have a sending site that's in a sensitive area or a remote area that's outside of a commercial core, and you transfer that into one of our town centers, TRPA will award you free bonus units. So in this case, say that stand-up paddleboard owner, he needed 4 residential units. He transferred in just 1 residential unit from a remote or sensitive area. We would give him the remaining 3 that he needed as a bonus incentive. The next option for this property owner that's looking to put in some residential units is he could deed restrict them. So say he wanted to target the local workforce. TRPA has an income-based eligibility program where we will give you all of the development rights you need, so long as you meet the criteria of that program. And let's go into kind of what that is. Again, it's income-based, and there's 3 tiers. There's affordable, moderate, and achievable. So long as the tenant or occupant is meeting the income criteria of this program, we will award you that free development right. TRPA does not set the price of development rights, but what I can tell you is, based on what we're seeing in the market today, a residential unit of use is going from anywhere to $20,000 to $27,000. So this isn't going to cover the entire cost of building a residential unit, but it does shave off some of those fees and some of that expenses. So let's use 2 South Shore counties as an example for qualifying for this program. Again, the tenant or the owner of those residential units just need to meet the income criteria. So for El Dorado, we use the area median income of $75,000. To receive a bonus unit at the affordable, they would need to be making $60,000 or less. For moderate, it would be $90,000 or less. And then we would award a bonus unit at the achievable level for anyone making $124,000 or less. The affordable and moderate income tiers are static, so they're going to be the same across the basin. The achievable is targeted for our local workers, and that is going to be based on a number of factors, and it varies by county. The reason that you're seeing different percentages by county is the methodology used to come up with these percentages were based on what is the median home price in that location and what is the median income in that location. So if you look at our example for El Dorado County, that's the income criteria. Douglas County is going to look a little different. So for Douglas County, the area median income is roughly $66,000. We will give you a free residential unit of use, that bonus unit, up to the achievable level of $233,000. So long as the tenants and the occupants are meeting that income criteria, you can be awarded a free unit. The other thing to keep in mind for this program is that the property needs to be within a half mile of a transit stop. It cannot be used for vacation use. It can be used for a single family home or a multifamily home, so 2 units or more. And we would award that anytime you come forward with a building project. The other option for that owner of the stand-up paddleboard shop to build those residential apartments up top is he can convert land units. So say he knows someone with an older motel that has tourist accommodation units. That property is underutilized. The owner is interested in removing some of that building and transferring off TAUs. You can convert a TAU to an RU, a CFA to RU, CFA to TAU, and vice versa. So that's another option there. And I want to quickly run through a couple of FAQs that we get quite a bit. Again, continue putting in your questions into our Q&A box. The first question is, can I transfer development rights outside of my jurisdiction, or what's called the hydrologic area or the watershed? And the answer is absolutely. You can transfer both land coverage and development rights to anywhere in the basin. You only need an application through TRPA. And here, the general rule of thumb is it has to go from a property that is more sensitive, that land capability that Ali talked about, to a property that's less sensitive. The next is, do I need an approved project before I can transfer? And the answer is no. You can transfer development rights at any time. So say that owner of the Santa paddleboard shop needed to get development rights from different sources. He could start collecting those and transferring those to his project before he even had conceptual drawings of what he wanted to do. The next is, are there bank development rights available out there? So bank development rights is when a building has actually already been removed, and those development rights that were associated with that older building are now just being held on a property. And the answer is there's a huge universe of bank development rights that are available. This is a snapshot of the inventory that's being held on private and public properties throughout the basin. So for example, there's roughly 1,000 TAUs that are being banked on properties today, over 200 residential units that are banked on properties today. Again, a lot of these are held by private property owners. So I can't guarantee that these are all available to be sold and transferred, but there is a universe available. The way to tap into this inventory and see what is available to buy and sell is you can either go to laketahoeinfo.org, and Jean's going to kind of walk through what that platform is. And then TRPA does also offer what's called the TDR Marketplace. And this is on our website at trpa.org. What this marketplace is it's basically a Craigslist where anyone can sign on and list an advertisement of something that they're willing to sell. So in this screenshot, it shows that someone is trying to sell a residential allocation for roughly $26,000. So this is a tool that's available for you all. Another frequently asked question that we get is, can I get a free residential bonus unit for an existing home? Again, those bonus units is that income restricted program. Let's go back to our example. This was the home that was in a neighborhood zoned single family. They had an apartment above the garage. They were able to get it verified by TRPA. So they had 2 residential units on this property. You know, they were thinking, wow, I'd really like to use this for a local worker. I think that I can sell off this RUU, again, for roughly $20,000, but I still need a development right for this apartment. You can apply to TRPA. We will give you a bonus unit, and then you could sell off that residential unit of use. So I think that is the end of the development rights portion. I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has any questions before I turn it over to Jean, and she's going to go into LT Info that talks about how you find information on properties, how you find out if there's been a verification or a transfer or anything like that. So I'll stop here for a moment.
Thanks, Jen. This is Jeff Cowan again. I've got a couple of questions that would probably be good for you to maybe grab right just quickly. What is definition of income criteria? Could you go through that one more time, the income criteria?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And let me go back to those slides. So in order to get a free bonus unit for a residential home, TRPA's we need to verify that the tenant or occupant is going to meet the income eligibility criteria of that program. So that tenant or the owner needs to meet these tiers in order to qualify for getting a free unit. So this example is using Douglas County. There is either apartment building or a home with maybe a second unit on it. Maybe it's a mother-in-law unit, things like that. As that homeowner, I want to rent that apartment, and I'm interested in getting a free bonus unit from TRPA. I just need to make sure the person that I rent it to is going to meet these income levels. So TRPA will actually issue a permit saying, okay, we are going to award you a moderate income bonus unit. Within that permit and also a deed restriction that goes to the property, there's going to be criteria that say whoever you rent it to needs to meet the moderate income level of $78,000. So that is their median income for the year. Does that help answer the question?
I'll bet it does. We've got a lot coming in about transfers, and I totally understand why. This is a big, complex topic, and it helps a lot of property owners. So if we could keep moving, and I will keep cataloging these so we can see how many we can combine into one answer at the end. Is that okay?
That sounds great. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in transfers. So yes, please keep those coming and we'll try to answer them.
Nice. Thanks, Jen.
So I'm going to turn it over to Jean.
Hey, thanks, Jen. Let me bring up my screen. Okay, can everybody see the Lake Tahoe info website now? My name is Jean McNamara, and I'm going to give you a quick demo of the parcel tracker that lives on the Greater Lake Tahoe info platform. And the aim of the parcel tracker is to take all the information that's in TRPA permit records and put it in an accessible and usable format for property owners, consultants, realtors, even the TRPA planners who do permitting on our, and also the local jurisdictions who do permitting on our behalf. All this information being on one website saves people from having to request paper files, come into the TRPA office, and pour through the files to find the information that they need. And since 2015, all TRPA permits that we issue are being scanned, and then the information from those permits are being uploaded into the parcel tracker. And we've also been working on scanning older files, and at this point we've converted over 11,000 paper permit records to electronic formats and uploaded that information into the parcel tracker. But unfortunately we still have a lot more to do, a lot of scanning. We have a very big file room and a lot of permit records that from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s that we need to put into an electronic format. So I was going to ask a quick question just to get a gauge of how many people are familiar with the parcel tracker. So Victoria was going to show a poll, and we could just get a quick idea of who's familiar. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds or a minute or so to answer the question, and we can see, kind of gauge to see whether people are familiar with it or not and have been using it. Okay, Victoria, can you show the results and see where we're at? Great, so a lot of you are familiar with it. It's at 63%. Some of you are not, so this will be a real quick overview of it for you, for those who are not as familiar with it. But I urge you to go in and check it out and see what information you can find. So when you start typing in, you can places you can search. There's two search bars. There's one up at the top here, and then there's one right here. You can start by typing in a parcel, an assessor's parcel number or an address. There is some guidance here on how to do your search, but it's good. It's a good thing to type slowly because it does start auto-populating. So if I start typing in an address, you can see it starting to auto-populate, and this is the address that I was looking for. So this main page gives you, whoops, hold on. Gives you a quick overview of the parcel. And then if you want to see more details, hit this button and you go to view parcel details. hold on. I'm just logging out so you can see what a non-logged in user sees, which is 90% of the people that go on here. Hold on. Let me type that address one more time. And let's get to the parcel. So again, this is the same parcel we saw on that last page, but it's more detailed information. Again, at the top, you'll see some high-level information about the parcel. You'll see the parcel size. You'll see some that say verified. That means that there has been a TRPA permit or a verification that had a site plan with it, that had a surveyed parcel size. So that's why it says verified. Oftentimes you'll see one that just says estimated, and that means that we don't have a site plan, but that's pulling that information in from our GIS system, which has estimated sizes of parcels. If you'd like to see the type of permissible or allowed uses on a parcel, there's a link to the local plan. It'll take you, hold on. It'll take you to the local plan here. So this parcel is in the Tahoe Island Plan Area Statement. And here's an outline of that so you can see it on a map. And then if you click this, you'll get a PDF of that plan area statement, or if it's an area plan, you'll get that. And then you can go through this, scroll down, and see what the permissible uses are for that parcel. Back to that other parcel we were looking at. Let's see. You can also, there's a note sections here. This is where TRPA staff will put in any notes about a parcel. Things can be like previous parcel numbers, or if a parcel's been retired from development and can't be developed, we'll make some notes there. Another important thing to look at here is the BMP status. So this is what we talked about earlier, called best management practices. All developed parcels in Tahoe are required to capture and infiltrate surface water runoff generated by development on their property. And then if that parcel can demonstrate that that stormwater is being infiltrated on their property, doing that through some measures that they need to put in, and that these are functioning and maintained, they can receive a BMP certificate. So this parcel does not have a BMP certificate, so you'll see this noted here. But let's find a parcel that has one. So this parcel does have a certificate, and you can see yes, it gives you the number. And then you can also print or view the certificate here. So it's a way to download it from the parcel tracker. It's also important to check what type of certificate they have and if there's any enforcement action against the property for failing to install the BMPs. You can see that this is a parcel that has a source control certificate. It has site constraints that are present on the property, like high groundwater, that make it unable to infiltrate that water on site. So it's issued a source control certificate. You can also see parcels that are participating in a part of an area-wide treatment. So these are parcels that maybe don't have full BMPs on site, but their runoff is being contained and treated through an area-wide treatment. So you can see this is part of the Bijou area-wide treatment. And also to see if there's enforcement action. So for this parcel, it does not have a BMP certificate, but it's under enforcement. You can also see in a parcel if there's any deed restrictions. These are TRPA deed restrictions. It is not a complete list of all the deed restrictions. It's the ones that we have found through our permit research. And this also does not replace the need to do a title search to see if there are any other restrictions that may be in place for the parcel. You can also view the land capability, as we talked about earlier when we talked about the Bailey system and the IPE system. This is a parcel that has had the land capability verified. If you see one that does not have anything populated here, it means it's likely that the parcel has not had a land keepability verification. We've made a concerted effort at TRPA to upload all of our land keepability information into the system, but again, there are ones that slip through the cracks and we may not have put it in here. But if we haven't verified it, then you will need to get a verification. And this tells you that this parcel is 10,602 square feet. It has allowable coverage of 30%, which means that their allowed coverage is 3,181. The existing inventory section, this tells you what TRPA has verified as what physically exists on the property. So if this is filled out, it means that there's been a verification through permits or a verification, and this is what TRPA is recognizing on the property. It also, note when we talked about grandfathered coverage, this property has more coverage than what it is allowed, and that's considered excess coverage. It was legally existing on the property prior to the TRPA rules, and the parcel can keep this coverage even though it's over what's allowed. But that verification needs to happen and so that we can fill out this section. There's also a section that talks about banked or transacted or transferred development rights. And banked means that the coverage or the units or physically existed on a parcel at one point and were verified by TRPA, but they have been removed. And being banked means that it's ready to be transferred off the parcel, or it could be put back on the parcel through a permit. So you can see this parcel had 2 single-family residential units banked. It had coverage banked. It subsequently transferred off the 2 residential units of use. So there are no more banked on the parcel. There are some that are physically existing, but they're not anymore banked. The next section shows all the TRPA permits. So this section links up to the TRPA permitting software, or a SELA system, that could also be accessed through by the public through TRPA's website. This section displays all the TRPA permits for a parcel. And then the section below under CAP documents, you can view any scanned, anything that was in the file that's been scanned, that's associated, any associated documents from this file that have been scanned. And again, we're actively scanning things, but you may see things in here that don't have corresponding CAP documents. If you're looking at a property and there are no permits displayed here, then it means that TRPA has not verified anything for the parcel, and verifications will need to be done. It's also important to note that this does not display any building permits from the counties or the city of South Lake Tahoe, so you will need to contact them to see those permits. And if you think that there's information that maybe we haven't scanned yet or uploaded into the parcel tracker, there's a request updated information button that you can hit. And if you fill this out, you can outline what you're looking for, and someone from TRPA will do some file research for you and update the tracker if there is more information. If your question is more complicated, we may need to refer your questions to one of the planners to help answer your question.
Thanks, Jane. I did have a pretty straightforward one. Alice looked up the use of parcel tracker, and the result with the APN was that there's no address. Do you know what that would have meant?
I don't know. I don't know what that, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, this is Joan Douglas from the BMP group. Sometimes you put an APN and there's no street address. Sometimes it's because it could be a new parcel that hasn't been assigned a street address yet. There could have been a lot line adjustment, something of that nature.
Okay. And one thing I wanted to really point out is that although you're seeing this on my laptop, when we developed this website, we wanted to make sure that it was mobile friendly and that it can be viewed anywhere very easily. So I know people who have used this on their cell phones when they've been looking for properties and seeing if things have been verified or not. So it is something that can be used on any mobile device. And I don't know if there are any other questions that we wanted to answer, but that's my quick overview of the parcel tracker. Again, I encourage you all to go in, play around with it, look for information, use the help request button. That's it.
Thank you so much, Jean. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all the panelists for this presentation. At this point, we are going to take some questions. And Jeff has kindly pointed out all of the questions that should be answered live on the Q&A. So if you do have questions at this point, we will be going through them on the Q&A, but please make sure to direct them there and not to the chat area. So we'll start with a question from John Falk. This one might be for you, Allie. He says, when might we see Placer County's ICE line drop to better reflect the remainder of the basin? And he goes into more detail about flood tests and how the Kings Beach is actually counted as separate parcels with individual APNs, even though they're unbuildable. So maybe you can answer that question, Allie, about when we might expect to see Placer County's ICE line drop. Allie, are you there?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute while sharing my screen there. We kind of talked about that before, and we will get a better answer and email that out. Like we said, at this point, there's nothing in the works for that.
Great, thank you for that. The next question is from Jim Wire, and this would be for Joan. He asks, do you still have the incentive program to install BMPs? And Joan, maybe you can talk a little bit about that program.
Okay. Hi, Jim. Hi, all. Currently, we do have an incentive program. It's called the Lake Friendly Business Program. Now, that is for commercial properties that have a higher pollutant load in general than single-family residence properties. It does recognize commercial properties that have installed and also importantly maintained their BMPs, and then profile the businesses through print ads and then social media exposure. In terms of single-family and multifamily residential properties, the incentive, in addition to contributing to lake clarity by reducing road track out, the incentive, we don't have any, I don't know, Jim, if you're referring to perhaps an old incentive program that may have once been in place. But currently, I mean, the incentive not only is to contribute to lake clarity, but it's also for property owners to stabilize their properties and prevent erosion. And those BMPs also help to enhance the property value and curb appeal, but also to really protect their foundations, their structures. Many times people don't realize how much BMPs actually do contribute to the health of their structure and their property in general. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, perfect, Joan. Also, John Falk wanted to know how long are BMP certs considered active or effective? Do they need to be refurbished from time to time and recertified?
So BMP certificates for single family residences, those certificates are in place for in perpetuity as long as the BMPs have been maintained, because the certificate is useless if the BMPs are no longer functioning. And this often comes up when there's a property transfer, someone comes in for a new permit and BMP maintenance is required. It should be required, you know, it's done. If you do it a little bit every summer, you're usually good to go, but it will come up when people go to often to transfer a property to someone else or a permit. In terms of commercial properties, once the certificate, BMPs are done and the certificate is in place, Maintenance is required from commercial properties roughly every 5 years. And the Stormwater Group really does work with commercial properties and homeowners as well, to help them with their maintenance and make it a little bit easier on them by having some free technical advice. That answer the question, I hope?
I hope so. And did you already talk about point of sale requirements?
And the point of sale, that is a great question. We get that all the time. BMPs, while they were required to all properties, all developed properties in the Tahoe Basin to be in place by 2008, many are not. So when folks fill out the BMP real estate disclosure form, the BMPs are not required at point of sale. That was a large conversation that happened back in 2015 with the real estate community and the TRPA board. So we are not requiring it at the point of sale. And just as a note, if anyone ever has any clients, buyers, sellers that want to ask questions about that, they can just call TRPA, the 202 hotline directly, and we can tell them all about that if they wish, but not at point of sale as of today, as of 2015, actually.
Thanks, Joan. What is the difference between a BMP certificate and a source control certificate? That question just came in from David.
Okay, so a BMP certificate, I think of it as a full BMP certificate. That means that the BMPs that have been installed on the property can infiltrate all of the stormwater runoff. So no water is leaving the property. Now, not all properties can do that. My driveway, I have a utility line that runs along the side of it. I can't infiltrate all of my driveway runoff because of the utility. Some folks may have super steep slopes that would prevent the installation of full infiltration BMPs. So then the property owner can install what we call source control BMPs, where they are going to be preventing erosion and stabilizing the soil and doing as much as they possibly can. They just can't do the full infiltration. And for those properties, then they get what we call a source control certificate, because that shows they've done everything they possibly could do given the property.
Awesome, Joan. If we could, I just wanted to I have a couple of questions answered about transfers between jurisdictions. There's been a few of those come through. Do the jurisdictions, need to sign off on the transfer? And then I've got another question to kind of follow up on that. Who wants to take that one?
Great. This is Jen. I can take that. That's a really great question. So in the past, prior to 2018, when you wanted to transfer development rights or coverage between jurisdictions, so say from the city to Placer County or vice versa, you needed a bunch of approvals. You needed approval from TRPA, and you also needed approval from each jurisdiction. In 2015, TRPA launched a collaborative working group process to look at the development rights system as a whole, to see how we can add in some more flexibility and to streamline. As part of that initiative, one of the results was to streamline the transfer process, and that eliminated the need to get local approval. So with transfers, when you're transferring between jurisdictions today, you only need approval from TRPA, and that's an application through us.
Got it. There was another question about that. There was more detail, and I can't find it right now. But I do have a question from Trevor. Maybe this is more general to development rights, existing rights. Have you worked out the transferability of all existing rights, CFA to residential to TAU, et cetera? I'm not sure if that means across boundaries or if that's just parcel to parcel within a jurisdiction.
Yeah, so I think that's a good clarification point. I appreciate the question. When we're talking about transfers, that's moving development rights from one property to another. So I'm moving CFA from property A, and it's going to result in CFA on property B. When we talk about conversions, that's when we're actually taking that land use unit and transferring it to something else. So it may have been CFA on property A. I'm going to transfer and also convert it to a residential unit on the receiving site. And yes, TRPA has a conversion equation, so to speak, for that conversion. It's similar to, you know, a money exchange. I get so many dollars for European Union or things like that. So if you go to trpa.org and you go onto our permitting tab, there's a page dedicated to development rights. And that's going to walk through the conversion ratios and what you can convert one land use unit to another. TRPA is working right now on building a super user-friendly conversion calculator that's going to live either on our website or on LT Info. That's just in the works right now.
Nice. So I found the other question that was perhaps more detailed from Natalie about going across jurisdiction boundaries. You did answer, do they require the sign off, but which ones do and what do they require in collaborations with TRPA processes such as MOUs?
Sure. So that is a question regarding transferring units across jurisdictional boundaries.
Yes.
I'm going to transfer from the city to Placer County, or maybe from Washoe to Douglas County, or even across state lines. That is permissible. You can transfer development rights and land coverage anywhere in the basin, across jurisdictional boundaries, across the state line. It's important to note a general rule of thumb is it has to go from a property that's more sensitive to a property that's less sensitive. And with that, you do not need approval from the local jurisdiction. You only need approval to transfer from TRPA through an application.
Nice. Jennifer, there were a lot of questions coming up during your presentation, kind of more specific to the slides you were showing. Jennifer asked if the house you showed twice looks like it's located near Heavenly. Is the apartment then legal? And does it have a full kitchen? I'm not sure if you'd be able to figure out the answer to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Someone busted me. I went out and I found an example of a house that was on the market today as an example. So that's a house that's actually on the market today. And we were showing an example of maybe a single family home that may have a mother-in-law suite or apartment above the garage. I do not know if that particular property has been verified by TRPA. If you have a property in question, the best place to go to see if something has been verified is laketahoeinfo.org and go to the parcel tracker. That is what Jean kind of walked through. You can type in the address and see if anything's been verified. It's a good thing to keep in mind if you're listing properties or looking at a property on the market and they're claiming that it has a legal unit. If nothing is showing on LT Info, do not assume that it's a legal unit. You can actually request through, I did this for my house. I have a home that's a similar case where it's in a single family neighborhood and there's an apartment above the garage. During the escrow process, I said, you know what, as part of the escrow, I want to make sure that both units can be verified. So I submitted an application to TRPA. Those verification applications typically take anywhere from 30 to 45 days. And I had it verified before we closed escrow. And I knew that I had 2 legal units.
Did you drop off or is that the end of the answer?
So that was the end of the answer.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure.
But one more thing to note there is, so what actually constitutes as a residential unit? So a residential unit consists of kitchen facilities, a bathroom, and some sort of living area in a nutshell. And that's the end.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to stick with this subject just a little bit longer, Jennifer. Thanks for hanging on with us. Regarding the paddleboard shop example that I think you made earlier, there's no assistance to move employee housing / residential housing to multi-use spaces and commercial cores, question mark. You require property owners to still purchase rights and move RUUs. Seems very cost prohibitive to strive toward the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. The stand-up paddleboard shop, that example, that business is actually located in a town center. And that's where we want development to be. We want these town centers to be walkable, bikeable, a mix of uses that really create these like thriving community cores. There's about 13 town centers across the basin. This is the Tahoe Y, in South Shore, some other areas, Tahoe City is another example. So we want to encourage development rights to move to these areas. For this business owner, because he's in a town center, there's 2 incentives or options available. So the first would be if he deed restricted it for local workers at that, the income tiers, TRPA would award the units, all the units that he needed, free of charge. The other option, which is an incentive to move development right onto his property, is if he were to transfer either a residential unit or other development right from an outlying area into his property that's in the town center, he could be eligible for bonus units. So maybe he only transferred 1 unit from an outlying or sensitive area, but because of that transfer, the incentive is we are going to give him an additional 1 to 5 units for just that 1 that was transferred. So there are some incentives available for him. Jeff, were there any others specific to development rights?
Yeah, I just read a really good one out, but I was muted.
Oops.
No, sorry, just keeping with this. Do you, can someone sell a development right to another landowner to be transferred to the purchaser's lot? Can you understand that one, the way it's written?
Yeah, absolutely. So most transfer transactions happen on the private market. And then once you find a willing buyer and seller, then you would submit an application through TRPA. You can transfer development rights. So you can transfer commercial units, tourist units, residential units at any time. That can be transferred to a vacant lot. That can be transferred to maybe a future redevelopment project, something like that. You can transfer that at any time. You can also transfer land use units that may not meet the zoning criteria of the receiving site. So maybe you transfer CFA to a single family neighborhood with the intent that later you're going to convert that commercial unit. Now, if you transfer development rights, you can transfer it at any time. When you actually go to build, you'll still need to meet the zoning, the density, all of those other standards. So we wouldn't let you build a commercial property within a residential neighborhood, but you could transfer CFA at any time with the intent to convert it later. The exception to that is with land coverage. Land coverage can only be transferred in association with a project. So Allie talked about an example where there's a residential lot. It had an existing home, and it was under the maximum land coverage of 1,800 square feet. If you were planning maybe a deck remodel or maybe an addition on your house and you were going to go up to that 1,800 square feet, you would need to have that project ready to go at the same time you request that transfer. But again, development rights can be transferred at any time.
Got it. If an existing grandfathered overdeveloped property is destroyed by a fire, will the property be allowed to rebuild to the previous levels?
Yeah, great question. So when a property is destroyed by a fire, that property owner, if those rights and the land coverage has not been already verified, they have up to 18 months to come into TRPA and say, hey, I need all this information verified. There's a disaster on my property. We're going to verify what we can, and that's going to be banked on the property for future use. When you have rights that exceed what you can do on a property today, but they are verified as legal, you can still use that at a later time. So one example that's happening in the city right now is that the older Motel 8 along Highway 50, kind of near the tourist core, is being remodeled. And it's completely being torn down, and it's going to be rebuilt as, I believe, a Hampton Inn. Now, the Motel 8 that existed there prior to this project had more tourist units than what would be allowed today. However, as part of that rebuild, those units were verified, they're grandfathered in, and they can be used for a future redevelopment project.
Thanks. Sorry, I was still typing to someone. Got a couple questions about ADUs. And I know Karen Fink is from TRPA is on the line too. So if she needs to jump in at any point, it looks like we got a few more minutes here. I'm just going to throw this one out though for anyone. State of California has attempted to create new housing by encouraging accessory dwelling units, what we call ADUs. But this seems in contrast to the position regarding coverage. How are we working to accommodate that?
I think that's a fantastic question. I'm going to turn that over to Karen Fink, our housing coordinator.
Hi, thanks, Jen and Jeff. TRPA has recently started looking at how we can potentially align our code with those new California policies. Whenever a state passes policies that, affect our region, but that can be aligned with our environmental thresholds, we want to do that. We, in February, brought some conceptual ideas to our local government and housing committee about how to best align with those California policies. And for most of the policies, we believe that we can align with them through some relatively simple code changes. There was some initial support for lifting the restriction that ADUs can only be built on parcels that are greater than 1 acre in size. However, the two issues that we think may take more time to work through are coverage and growth caps. So the California law says that ADUs cannot be subject to coverage restrictions or growth caps. And those two issues are, relate pretty close, they're very related to some of our core threshold issues. So those will take more time. We wouldn't be able to just waive our coverage restrictions for ADUs, but we may be able to develop some sort of alternative coverage program for ADUs, and we need to work through that. So I typed an answer to this question. I don't know if everyone can see it, but we are keeping a mailing list of anyone who's interested in learning more about where we're going with ADUs and other elements of our housing work plan. And if people want me to put them on that email list, I'll send out emails when this issue comes to any board committee or the governing board for hearing so that people can stay up to date on it.
Awesome, Sauce. Thank you very much, both of you guys. One more question about ADUs, and then I've got two questions about BMPs, and I think that we're going to be out of time, but there are a lot of it, but there's a ton of questions on here that we're getting that are very, very specific to a particular project or parcel, and those are great. We are going to get to those kind of maybe offline with those individuals. And one more question about ADUs from Jennifer. If you sell off the ADU, then do you have to not use it as a rental any longer? And then second, also, if you sell it do you lose the second legal dwelling right?
Jen, do you want to answer that one? Because I think that's a little more related to development rights.
Sure. Yeah, I can try to take a stab at it, and then chime in if I need to kind of course correct here. For a accessory dwelling unit, say you have a detached unit maybe above your garage or in your backyard, that's going to require a residential unit of use. If you were to sell off that residential unit, you would either need to receive a bonus unit to replace that from TRPA, or you would actually have to remove the structure. So you cannot have a existing building without the associated development right. Does that help answer the question, or was there another piece to it?
If I could just add on to that, yeah, I think that I don't know if that totally answers the person's question, but in the case of like if you had a garage ADU or something that was part of the attached building, I believe, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, you could just rip, if you want to sell off that residential unit of use, you could just rip out the kitchen, and then that portion of the house would turn into your regular home again. Is that right?
That is correct. So anytime you convert a space, so in that case it's a remodel, you're going to rip out a kitchen and sell off the residential unit. That would be a building permit, and you would need to do a verification application through TRPA before you do any sort of demolition, because we need to verify that's a legal unit. And then you could do a remodel, which would be a building permit, and you would have that residential unit banked on your property. At the same time that you would do the remodel building permit through the local jurisdiction, you'd want to come into TRPA and do the banking application, just to make sure that you have that for future use or that you can sell off at a later time. That's going to actually record a deed restriction onto your property saying that TRPA is recognizing that you had this residential unit, you did a remodel, but it's still associated with your property.
Nice, thanks guys. I'm just gonna try and slip a quick BMP question or two in. I know that we might go over time, but if Joan's still on the line, where can we see the definition of everything possible that I think you referred to, Joan, as far as BMPs? Everything possible seems a little open-ended.
Yes, everything possible does seem open-ended, and I should have said what is possible in terms of infiltration BMPs as set forth in the BMP handbook. So that's where we're going to find what is required in terms of infiltration BMPs. However, I would also say that each parcel is unique, and there is no cookie cutter prescription. There are some standardized prescriptions, but every parcel is unique, and I really encourage everyone to call TRPA, to call the Stormwater Group, to determine what BMPs would be best given the site, because we don't want folks over engineering or wasting their money or anything like that. But in answer to the question, the infiltration BMPs are all in the BMP handbook, which you can find on the TahoeBMP.org website. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks. And Natalie asked a question about BMPs that's pretty specific. We're out of time, Natalie. If that's okay, we'll kind of try and answer that specifically. Victoria, do you want me to hand it back over to you, or are we at time right now?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff, for bringing up all of those questions. And thank you everyone for being present. We are out of time right now, but we will be sending all of this information out, and you will have the contact information for all of the presenters. So if you have a specific question, please make sure that you reach out to them. We're always available, especially right now via email. So I'm going to say thank you to everybody for being here today, and have a great rest of your day.